Did you know that one of the deadliest pandemics in human history never actually ended? It still kills more than 1 million people every single year, quietly, persistently, and almost invisibly. The disease is tuberculosis, and despite being curable, it continues to claim more lives than HIV, malaria, and most modern infections combined. Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into the pandemic that never ended, how tuberculosis still kills millions. In this episode, we'll explore what tuberculosis truly is, why it remains one of the world's oldest and most resilient killers, and how it reveals the deep inequalities that still define global health. Tuberculosis, or TB, is an infectious disease caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, a microscopic bacterium so small it can float in the air. All it takes is one breath, one cough, one conversation with an infected person, and the bacteria can enter your lungs. For some, the immune system holds it back. For others, it slowly destroys the lungs from the inside out, turning breath, the most basic act of life, into agony. TB is often called an ancient disease, but it's also a modern one. Archaeologists have found traces of tuberculosis in Egyptian mummies more than 4,000 years old. Yet today, it still infects over 10 million people every year and kills around 1.3 million, more than any other infectious disease apart from COVID-19 at its peak. Unlike the coronavirus, however, TB never left. It didn't end with vaccines or disappear with lockdowns. It simply continued, hidden behind the walls of poverty, overcrowded housing, and neglect. The tragedy of tuberculosis lies in its paradox. It is both preventable and curable, yet still rampant. We have had antibiotics capable of curing TB since the 1950s. We even have vaccines, the BCG vaccine, given to billions of children worldwide. But the truth is that tuberculosis isn't a scientific problem anymore. It's a social one. TB thrives in the cracks of inequality, in slums where families share a single room, in prisons with no ventilation, in refugee camps where health care is scarce. It preys on the poor, the malnourished, and the forgotten. For the rich, TB is a chapter in history. For the poor, it's still reality. Behind every case is a chain of failure, delayed diagnosis, interrupted treatment, underfunded programs, and stigma that keeps people from seeking help. Each failure allows the disease to spread, mutate, and survive, even in the 21st century. Every few seconds, someone somewhere in the world dies from tuberculosis. Most of them are not in headlines or history books. They are workers, mothers, children, people whose deaths go uncounted because TB has become the disease of the invisible. It doesn't strike suddenly like Ebola or shock the world like a new pandemic. It kills slowly, silently, and mostly among those whose lives already carry the burden of inequality. In the crowded neighborhoods of Mumbai, Manila, and Johannesburg, people cough behind masks not for fear of COVID, but because TB has never left. For many, diagnosis comes too late. The symptoms, fever, fatigue, weight loss, and a cough that never ends, are often ignored until the lungs are beyond repair. By then, each breath becomes a battle. The emotional toll of tuberculosis is devastating. Patients often endure months or years of treatment, swallowing up to 20 pills a day, suffering nausea, hallucinations, and hearing loss from toxic antibiotics. Some give up before the cure is complete, not out of choice, but exhaustion. Others never begin treatment at all because they cannot afford the clinic visit or the daily journey to a hospital. And then there is stigma, the quiet killer that travels with the bacteria. In many countries, being diagnosed with TB means being labeled as unclean, dangerous, or even cursed. Families hide their sick. Employers dismiss them. Women are abandoned by their partners. The disease isolates before it kills. Even more terrifying is drug-resistant tuberculosis, a mutation born from incomplete treatments and neglect. It doesn't respond to standard antibiotics, costs up to 100 times more to cure, takes up to 2 years of treatment, and still kills nearly half of those who contract it. The world now faces an invisible epidemic within an epidemic, a form of TB evolving faster than our will to stop it. Each death from tuberculosis is a measure of the world's failure, not a failure of science, but of solidarity. We know how to cure it. We just haven't chosen to cure everyone. The cost is not only measured in lives lost, but in trust eroded. Trust in health systems, in fairness, in the idea that progress is shared. Because if a disease that has had a cure for 70 years still kills over 1 million people a year, what does that say about us? The persistence of tuberculosis is not an accident. It is the outcome of a system that was never built to protect everyone equally. For decades, global health has treated TB as a problem of the poor, a relic of the past that would fade with modernization. But it never did, because the world never built the infrastructure to make that promise real. At the heart of this failure is inequality, economic, geographic, and political. The majority of TB deaths occur in low- and middle-income countries, yet those same nations receive only a fraction of global health funding. The World Health Organization estimates that the fight against TB is underfunded by nearly $3 billion every year. While billions were mobilized in months to develop vaccines for COVID-19, tuberculosis, a disease that kills more quietly, has waited decades for the same urgency. The current TB vaccine, BCG, was developed in 1921. It protects infants from severe disease, but does little to prevent transmission in adults who spread the infection most. Promising new vaccines exist, but trials stall for lack of funding. The same is true for diagnostics and treatments. Many clinics in Africa and Asia still rely on century-old methods, microscopes, and guesswork because modern tests are too expensive. Even the drugs we use are outdated. Standard TB treatment requires at least 6 months of daily antibiotics. For drug-resistant strains, up to 2 years. Many patients quit halfway, not because they want to, but because they must return to work to survive. Their incomplete treatments breed stronger, deadlier strains. The global supply chain also fails the fight. Essential TB drugs are often produced by a handful of manufacturers. When one factory halts production or one shipment is delayed, entire regions face shortages. Hospitals are left rationing medicine, and health workers improvise with what little remains. But perhaps the deepest flaw is psychological, the world's ability to forget. TB doesn't make headlines anymore. Its victims are largely unseen: migrants, prisoners, refugees, the poor. The disease thrives in shadows because the world allows those shadows to exist. For more than a century, tuberculosis has been both a medical challenge and a moral test. And so far, humanity has failed both. Tuberculosis reveals the cruel duality of global health. 2 worlds living on the same planet, breathing the same air, but separated by privilege. In one world, TB is a chapter in a history book. In the other, it is a death sentence whispered through coughing lungs. In wealthy nations, tuberculosis has become almost invisible. Most people in Europe or North America will never meet someone with active TB. If they do, diagnosis is swift, treatment is free, and recovery is expected. But in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Eastern Europe, TB remains a daily reality. In India alone, more than 2.5 million new cases are reported each year. In Nigeria, 1 in every 3 patients goes undiagnosed. Even within single countries, the divide is staggering. It's not that the bacteria choose, it's that inequality does. TB doesn't discriminate biologically, but society does. Access to medicine, clean air, nutrition, and care determines who survives. For a moment, the COVID-19 pandemic seemed to close that gap. Both rich and poor nations faced a contagious disease that ignored borders. But when vaccines arrived, the pattern repeated itself. Wealth dictated access, and inequality decided outcomes. Tuberculosis never needed to teach this lesson again, yet the world still refuses to learn it. For decades, TB has lingered, a ghost of pandemics past. But in recent years, a quiet revolution has begun. Scientists, doctors, and activists are bringing TB back into the spotlight. In 2018, the United Nations held its first high-level meeting on tuberculosis, pledging to end the epidemic by 2030. It was historic, but progress remains slow. Global funding is still billions short each year. Yet for the first time, TB is being recognized not as a disease of the poor, but as a test of global solidarity. Hope lies in new science. The M72AS01E vaccine, developed by GSK and the Gates Foundation, showed nearly 50% protection in early trials, a potential breakthrough after a century. New drugs like bedaquiline and preventtive are transforming treatment for drug-resistant TB, cutting therapy from years to months. Rapid tests like GeneXpert can now detect infection within hours instead of weeks. But technology alone cannot fix what ethics has broken. Without political will, even the best tools remain locked in warehouses and journals. Grassroots organizations are now leading the way. In India, survivors train as community health advocates. In South Africa, former TB patients guide others through treatment to reduce stigma. Across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, mobile clinics bring care to remote villages. The fight back is happening, but led by those most affected. What the world needs now is not a burst of attention, but sustained action. Ending tuberculosis means treating healthcare not as charity, but as infrastructure, funding not just drugs, but systems, diagnostics, logistics, education, nutrition. The story of tuberculosis is not one of ignorance. It is one of indifference. Humanity discovered how to cure TB decades ago, yet the disease still kills 1.3 million people every year. The question is no longer scientific, but moral. Knowledge means nothing without equality. The tools to defeat TB already exist, but access does not. Science cannot save lives if politics and profit stand in the way. Progress is only as strong as the systems that deliver it. TB thrives where health systems are weak, where clinics lack equipment, where poverty makes even a bus ride to treatment unaffordable. Pandemics never truly end until they end for everyone. TB has been proving this for over a century. It is the ghost that lingers, the reminder that global health cannot be divided by wealth or geography. Tuberculosis is not a mystery. It's not an unsolved riddle of science or a challenge beyond human reach. It is a mirror reflecting the moral and structural failures of a world that has learned to live with preventable death. The pandemic never ended because we allowed it to continue. This is not just a story about disease, it's a story about time, about how one infection has followed humanity from ancient tombs to modern cities. We have conquered space, mapped the human genome, and created vaccines in record time. And yet, millions still cough blood into their hands in silence, waiting for a cure that has existed longer than they've been alive. The next great victory in global health won't come from a miracle drug or breakthrough technology. It will come from the decision to act, to fund research, strengthen healthcare systems, fight stigma, and demand fairness. Ending tuberculosis is not just a medical goal, it is a moral test. Because until every person in every country can breathe without fear, the pandemic continues. If this story moved you, don't let it fade into the noise. Share this video, start a conversation, and subscribe for more investigations uncovering the hidden realities of global health. Awareness is power, and power, when shared, becomes change. For centuries, tuberculosis has thrived in the shadows. It's time to bring it into the light and end the pandemic that never ended.